There are many underutilized weapons in Monster Hunter World, namely the 13 that aren't longsword, which is such a shame because playing multiple weapons will really enrich your Monster Hunter experience, with each additional weapon that you pick up almost being like its own entire new game. Amongst the most underutilized and underrated ones is the lance, an often misconstrued choice as a defensive turtling weapon that sees the hunter mostly hiding behind their shield and giving the occasional poke, which couldn't be a bigger joke. That's right, folk. I'm going to talk about why lance is actually the most aggressive weapon that will allow you to stay in the forefront of the fight, a general overview of the weapon, the sort of stuff that it can do, and why you absolutely should give it the time of day. I'm Light It Up Dan. The sort of content I love to produce aims to reduce the overwhelm and unknown of the Monster Hunter games. If you're looking for an all-weapons overview covering all 14 options, check it out. It might help you what to start with or what to play next. The channel's currently sitting around 80% unsubscribed viewers, with the majority of you returning from shorts or otherwise. If you enjoy the videos, do subscribe, and with that said, let's jump in. Go woke, have a poke, bish bash bosh, 1 2 3, take an arrow to the knee, thanks for watching. Lol. You'll often hear that lance appears to be boring, always holding up your shield or constantly doing the 1 2 3 poke attacks, which isn't inherently inaccurate, it's just that that's what you'll perhaps do when you first pick up the weapon, before you've really had time to break it in and get used to the moveset, likely because you don't even know the moveset. And it also incorrectly assumes that thrusting an enemy with your powerful ass spear is in some way not fun. Are you crazy? So let's break it all down from the top. The lance weapon is comprised of the shield and of course the spear, giving you access to the best and strongest block in the game. Joint best with gun lance, but you have quicker access to it, you can do the counter attacks, get into power guard, etc. Funnily, even with all of these different guarding moves, the strongest block you've got access to is when you're just holding right trigger or R2 to just hold up your shield. Your core combo strings are your regular attacks with the 3 input jabbing thrust. With Y or triangle, this is the mid thrust combo. You can also press B or circle to do the high thrust combo, which does have better motion values and deals more damage than the mid thrust, so you should use it where you can. Great for reaching higher spots like the monster's head if it's leaning up, or the top of its tail, its wings, etc. These work in a highly modular fashion, so you can switch between the mid and the high thrusts at will. If this is all the weapon had access to, I would understand some of the criticisms, or at least the false perceptions I should say, but these are literally the core basics of how to use the weapon when you first picked it up. We haven't talked about the counter thrust, the guard dash, power guarding, the dash attack, or the super cool clutch claw counter either. Well, let's dive in. Arguably the most awesome element about the weapon is that you can stay right in the fight, face to face, toe to toe with the monster, matching each and every one of their blows with this counter and riposte playstyle, very unique to the lance. It starts to form this beautiful rhythm where the hunts feel more like ballet or like boxing, this melody, this dance. It's honestly very beautiful, in a kind of messed up smashing the out of monsters way. Upon guarding attacks, you will take chip damage, a portion of which will be recoverable and will present as the red bar on your HP. The higher your level in the guard skill, the less chip and stamina damage you will take. Hearing about the recoverable HP should have let off a light bulb in your head, and yes, you're right, resentment is fantastic with the lance, as is offensive guard when you block right before receiving damage. These two alone are massive increases to your overall attack for the weapon. A very dynamic way to proc your offensive guard is with the counter thrusting that the weapon can do. Regardless of whether you spec into offensive guard or not, the counter thrust is one of the core abilities of the lance. By hitting right trigger and B or R2 and circle, you'll go into this counter thrust stance, blocking and riposting the next attack you receive for the duration of the counter, flowing to and from directly between your thrust combos, allowing you to adopt that beautiful rhythm we were talking about earlier. During your thrusting combo, you're about to get smacked, but boom, you go into a counter thrust and then continue on. No sheathing, no rolling away, nothing like that. You're just keeping up that momentum, keeping up the attacks. No other weapon adopts this parry and riposte playstyle. Chargeblade gets pretty close with guard points and responding with the SAED if you want to, but not quite like the lance does. As mentioned, going into counter thrust right before you receive damage will proc your offensive guard, so it's a fantastic way to get an up to 15% attack boost just by playing the weapon normally. You do have to be careful with your counter thrust because it does get consumed and you will automatically riposte. So if the monster has a barrage of attacks, you might block the first, but then you'll get smacked by the second or third. You also need to be mindful that your teammates can and will proc your counter thrust as well, which can be pretty disorienting and leading to situations where you're like, wait, what? Huh? With the movesets we've looked at so far, we haven't uncovered them all. You already have the tools to deal with so much stuff that can be otherwise really tricky with other weapons. You'll find that Lance can provide a really nice matchup for monsters that maybe you otherwise struggle with. Tigrex, Glavenus, and Zenoga are just some that come to mind for myself. Namiel as well, otherwise I get blasted by her water cannons constantly. From your counter thrust before and if it doesn't get activated, you're able to use two different moves. Hitting right trigger and A or R2 and X will put you into a power guard, placing the hunter into a crouched stance where they get an omnidirectional block, which your regular guard and counter thrust do not have. Fantastic to get into if your counter thrust is out of position and you're about to get smacked from the side or behind. Holding it down will rapidly drain your stamina, and after a moment or two your shield will flash, signaling that you've been granted an inherent free guard up. From your power guard you can go into the powerful counter thrust with B or circle, which also can be pivoted omnidirectionally and can serve as a fantastic dynamic offensive repositioning tool. Also useful for a wake up hit if you're the best option compared to the other weapons in the group. Instead, pressing Y or triangle will go into a leaping thrust, a nice and quick gap closing technique, or the dash attack with Y and B or triangle and circle, initiating an on foot jousting attack. The other move you can do out of the counter thrust is the counter claw, which sees the hunter place the shield in front of them and get out their clutch claw. If struck from the front by a monster's part during this stance, you'll Spider-Man over to the monster's part that connected with you, blocking the attack in the process and placing you on the monster so that you can do your clutch claw attack. A fantastic and dynamic way to ensure that you can keep the monster tenderized with a powerful riposte to their attacks. Do note that whilst you have high damage mitigation during this, you are not invulnerable. You can and will cart if you're on low HP and you undergo some damage whilst you're clawed on. This is actually the most dynamic implementation of the clutch claw in the game. The only true instance of it being an addition to the weapon that does not reduce its heterogeneity compared to the other 13. Yeah, you've got the sword and shield's claw Yuken and the dual blades rising slashes after its B combo, even the insect glaive's mid-air clutch claw, which are all lesser examples of a dynamic implementation of the claw. If only all weapons had something like the counter claw instead of the homogeneity of aiming your clutch claw on and then going on to the monster's part. But I digress, that's a different discussion entirely. From your regular guard, you can hold down left stick and press Y or triangle to go into a guard dash, allowing the hunter to advance forward with a shield up, blocking any attacks during the advance. When done after a different action like the leaping thrust, or your hops between your thrusting attacks for example, you can pivot with the guard dash in any of the four compass directions by pointing the left stick accordingly. The guard dash and the leaping thrust is a fantastic gap closer, and a great way to maintain offense whilst also being defensive, which is actually a great characterization of the weapon as a whole. Alternatively, you can press Y or triangle to do a shield attack after the guard dash, a very short range quick shield bash delivering a lot of KO quickly. Further developing and understanding the guard dash's usage and improving upon your implementation of it is probably the single most important aspect of mastering the lance and going from an okay lance player to a really good one. You can use it to advance through roars, very easily proc your offensive guard for a massive 15% attack boost, dynamically gap closing and repositioning yourself with ease. Learn to love your guard dash. It's very transformative. And the last attack I really want to talk about here, which is out of your guard again, we touched on this earlier from the power guard, is your dash attack. During your guard, by pressing Y and B or triangle and circle, you will initiate the dash attack, the on-foot crazy jousting charging attack. Bit of a meme, but it is pretty fun. And not only that, but it's also very powerful, setting off the hunter on a marathon sprint with their lance out in front of them, dealing tick damage to anything that it brushes up against, ending with the lance's most powerful attack, the finishing thrust. Actually, the joint most powerful attack. If you turn around on yourself during the charge and you do the reverse swing, that's the same damage as the finishing thrust as well. If you've been dashing for quite some time or you speed up by sliding down a slope, you'll notice your hunter gains a charge level during the dash attack, increasing the speed, I believe the tick damage as well, and very importantly transforming the finishing thrust into the finishing twin thrust, a double striking attack but the single most powerful one the lance can do. You'll often see lance players, if you ever see see a Lance player ever at all, doing a dash attack on a downed monster after their thrust combo. Now you know why. 'Tis strong. Listen, I'm not saying you have to use Lance. I'm just saying if you don't use it, you suck, and you probably should be using Lance. So now that I think about it, I guess what I'm saying is you really have to use Lance. When you combine all the different elements we've looked at during this video here, you'll start to understand what I'm talking about with that rhythm, with it feeling like a dance. And when it starts to click, let me tell you that nothing else really scratches the itch in the same way. I'm a Lance enjoyer amongst many other weapons, don't get me wrong, but it does have a special place and it does deliver something that none of the other weapons can. I'm going to leave you with a full unedited fight using the Lance, so you can get a feel for how it might look once you actually understand more of the mechanics behind it. I'm by no means a top tier Lance player. I'm relatively much better with a handful of other weapons, but you'll get a pretty good grasp of it. Just before that though, if you do use Lance or you're thinking about it, let me know in the comments. I would love to hear from you. As mentioned at the start, the channel's currently sitting at around 80% unsubscribed viewers, with the majority of you returning. If you enjoy the videos, do subscribe. For regular open sessions, come and join the Discord and the live streams over on Twitch. I will leave all of these links for you in the description. Thanks for watching, enjoy the Lance hunt, and until next time, I'll see you in the new world.